Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to go through all of the thriller books that I've ever read and letting you guys know if I would recommend them or not. We're not going to go in any particular order. I'm just going to go in the order that I had them on my Goodreads, which I don't even think that's accurate, like time frame or anything like that. So yeah, let's just get started. So one of the first books that I did read in this category is The Perfect Marriage by Geneva Rose. Basically, you're following a lawyer who is our main female character, and in the beginning you find out that the husband has been cheating on her and that his mistress has been found dead in their like lakeside house that they share. So it's not their main house, but it's their lake house. Basically, you're going through this trial where, like I said, she is a lawyer, and so it's more of like the trial behind it, and you're kind of getting to the bottom of what really happened. I was personally very shocked by the ending. I didn't see it coming at all. But it is kind of like a specific trope that not a lot of people tend to like, or some people are against this kind of trope happening in thrillers. I'm obviously not going to say what it is, but I personally really liked it. And yeah, so by the way, I'm not really going to say too much about the plot, so I'm going to give you like a little bit about it, but obviously most thrillers you kind of want to go into blind, or else, you know, the entire point of it will get spoiled for you. But yeah, so that is The Perfect Marriage. The next book is Brain Damage by Frida McFadden. You're basically following a doctor who in the beginning gets shot in the head and she cannot remember who did it, and she's basically going through like therapy, and she has her boyfriend in this case kind of helping her through it. And yeah, I personally found the ending a little bit predictable, but the Goodreads reviews for it are pretty good, so maybe I was just reading too many thrillers at this time, which I will say, like, that's definitely a theme that I've seen before. When you read too many thrillers back to back, they start getting a little bit more predictable than if you only read some maybe once in a while. But yeah, I personally didn't love it, and so I wouldn't necessarily recommend that one, especially since she has so many other thrillers that are a lot better. And I guess let's just stick to Frida McFadden. So I did read both of her Handmaid's books or Housemaid books. I know there's another one coming out at some point. The first one was probably one of the most shocking thrillers that I have ever read, actually. I did not see anything coming in that book, especially like the plot twist that you get to around halfway. That really blew my mind. And so basically you're following this housemaid Millie. She is recently released from prison. We're not sure why in the beginning. And basically just having a prison record in general makes it harder for her to get jobs. So she accepts this job as a maid for this specific family, and there's a lot of just weird things that goes on. The mom in this family is kind of very, I mean, I hate to say it, they're all kind of weird, but she just seems to have a very like all over the place personality. She seems to forget what she does. She's very critical, but then also just very overly nice at some points. And then also the daughter is kind of creepy. But yeah, definitely one of the better thrillers I've read. The second one wasn't quite as good as the first, but I definitely still would recommend both of the ones in this series. And I am really looking forward to reading the third one once it comes out. And then the last one that I've read by Frida McFadden is Never Lie, which basically you're following a couple as they're touring houses. Basically they're looking at houses to potentially purchase. One of the houses that they go to is one house that used to be the house of some psychiatrist lady. She went missing or died, and they found her, I can't even remember which. And so basically they're in this house. I can't remember if they get stuck there or something like that. They find tapes between, you know, the psychiatrist and her patients and start listening to them, and it's just very weird and creepy. I did really like it. I think I gave it like around a 4. I definitely would recommend, and I did like it a lot more than Brain Damage, but not quite as much as The Housemaid. Okay, so next, getting into Alice Feeney. I've read 2 of her books, I think. The first one that I read was Rock, Paper, Scissors, since I heard Sarah Caroli like raving about that book. I did really like it. Basically, it's about, again, a couple who get snowed into this house that they're looking at, again, potentially to purchase, and there's also somebody else there. You're kind of going through the past and the present, and again, a lot of creepy things are going on. It takes place in a really wintry environment, so I do think it would be perfect to read either like fall or winter, because like I said, they do get snowed in. And yeah, definitely one of the better thrillers I read. I absolutely did not see the ending coming at all, and I definitely would recommend this one. And then the next one that I read by Alice Feeney was His and Hers. Basically, you're following a reporter as she goes back to her hometown and is working on a case. She has a little bit of history with this town. Obviously, she's from there. Her mom lives there. You know, she has exes that live there. And yeah, so she's working on this case, and I think it's a murder case, but I did kind of guess the ending. I at least knew who did it. I didn't actually guess how or kind of why, I guess, but I did have a really strong feeling about who it was, and it was correct, which even though doesn't necessarily take away from the story, because otherwise it was pretty good. It definitely wasn't my favorite thriller, although a lot of other people do tend to like it, so I would still say like definitely give it a chance, especially if you're newer to thrillers, but I wouldn't necessarily say it was my favorite, so I do recommend it, but I wouldn't necessarily say it's at the top of my list for thrillers. The next one is Verity by Colleen Hoover, which everybody has a very different opinion on Colleen Hoover. I'm not personally her biggest fan, but I also don't hate her either, you know what I mean? I only read this and Ugly Love, I think, so I don't necessarily have the biggest opinion. I do think they are better for people who aren't, you know, avid readers, don't read very much, especially if you're just getting into reading. Her books might be a little bit better, although a lot of people do warn against the toxicity of her characters and just like the relationships in general, especially in this book, I will have to say. It is a thriller though, so I think it's a little bit more excusable in that sense, where it's like you're not necessarily going in it looking for, you know, some wholesome romance. You're kind of expecting some dark themes, which you definitely will get from this. And so basically our main character is getting hired to finish this series by Verity, who is an author. Verity gets into like a car accident or just some sort of accident, can't really remember, that makes her basically like incapacitated. She's bedridden, she's not really mentally there either. Our main character, I think Lowen is her name, she gets hired by Verity's people to go live in their house, go through all of her documents, and then finish her series. While she's there, she finds some creepy things, goes through some interesting circumstances. There's a little bit of a romance in there, which is kind of weird, but yeah. So I would honestly still kind of recommend it. It's a very intriguing read. A lot of people are very torn up about the ending. It is kind of open to interpretation, so you can believe what you want to at the end. Like I said, I would actually recommend this one. It is very interesting. You know, it's not necessarily about a perfect relationship or anything like that, so just ignore any like toxic relationships that go on. That's not really the point of the book, but it definitely got me at the end. I wasn't really expecting anything that did happen, so yeah, I would recommend. Why not? The next one that I read was In My Dreams I Hold a Knife, and that one I did actually really like. It is kind of dark academia too, because it takes place at a college and it is, you know, got those dark themes. Our main character is going back to her college for a school reunion. I can't remember if it's like 5 or 10 years, but basically while she was there, her roommate was brutally murdered and the boyfriend was convicted of this murder, but she's not totally believing that he was the one who did it. She's going back there. All of the friends that she had when she was there are going back there. Her ex-boyfriend's there. You know, there's a whole bunch of like things that they have to go through while they're there, because the girl's brother who was murdered is there and is kind of like orchestrating a bunch of weird stuff going on. The ending was pretty crazy. I didn't necessarily see any of that coming at all. So again, one of the better thrillers that I've read, and I definitely would recommend. The only Karen Slaughter book that I've ever read is False Witness, and this thriller wasn't much of a thriller in like the traditional sense. I don't know if it was more of like a mystery. It didn't necessarily feel like a big reveal at the end or anything like that, which is what I normally associate with thrillers. It is very well written, I have to say, and it is kind of long, which is something that I didn't necessarily think was super necessary. And also I will say, if you go into this one, you definitely have to check the trigger warnings. There is a lot of like seriously dark and disturbing topics that it goes over, which for me also isn't necessarily what I'm super into. I more so care about the mystery aspect of it, where you really want to figure out what happened, and I don't think that's as much of a point with this book. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend it if you are looking for a traditional thriller where you want to be shocked, where you want to be so invested in the story that you have to keep reading. That's not really what I got from this book, although I do definitely want to read some more of Karen Slaughter's books because I have heard really good things about them in general. But again, not my favorite, so wouldn't necessarily recommend False Witness. Okay. And then the last thriller slash book that I'm going to be talking about is Sharp Objects by Gillian Flynn. I actually read this one in a reading vlog a few months ago, and I actually really like this one. There is a, I think either Hulu or HBO show about this, which I watched like 1 or 2 episodes and haven't finished it. Anyways, It is about our main character, who again is a reporter, finds out about these murders that happened in her hometown, and her boss basically forces her to go investigate and write a story on it, since again it is her hometown. And so she goes back and ends up living with her mom, or at least just staying with her mom for the time being. At her mom's house is also, I can't remember if it's her half sister or full sister, doesn't really matter anyways, it's her sister. And the entire family just has very creepy things about them. And not only does her family have creepy things about them, the entire town is kind of creepy. There's a lot of weird connections between everybody in it and her family, and then also just her and her past. And this one definitely got me. I kind of had a feeling which people were involved with this whole murder, but it definitely wasn't at all how I expected everything to go down at the end. So for that, I did really like it. It is a very fast pace and pretty short. It's less than 300 pages, but it was definitely one of my favorite thrillers that I've ever read, and definitely would recommend, obviously, because it was so good. That's gonna be the end of this video. I haven't really read too many thrillers, but I figured this would be a good video to make, especially while we're still at the height of spooky season, especially for some of you guys that might be looking for thrillers and have heard maybe some of these names out there and weren't sure which one to pick up. But yeah, so let me know if you guys have read any of these books or if you plan on reading any of these books, and yeah, let me know just some of your thoughts. So I will see you guys all in the next one.